So here we have an example of a small dent repair that we did on this fender. So what you're seeing here, this is the polyester putty. So what it does is this fills in really small dents. Here we had just a, kind of a tiny little dent. So what we'll do is we'll sand this area. We'll put our polyester putty. We'll sand the polyester putty, and if you check it with your hand, you can feel it. It's smooth. You shouldn't be able to feel any transition.
That's incredible.
So then what's going to happen next is we're going to put a primer over top of that. The primer is going to seal the body filler and seal this bare metal. You need a barrier in between your paint. You can't just paint over top of bare metal and the body filler. You want that primer as kind of a barrier in between. So that would be our next step for that.
So after that, do you paint the entire fender, or do you just paint the portion? Because I feel like that would be really hard to do.
Right.
How does that work?
So yeah, you're correct. We would paint this entire fender. In the case of this truck, we're actually painting the whole truck. We're just fixing various spots throughout it, and then the whole truck will get sanded, and the whole truck will get painted.
Talk a little bit about this booth. So it looks to be very interesting. How does this whole paint booth work?
So what we want to do is we want to isolate anywhere where there's paint fumes being sprayed. So the Ministry of the Environment has very specific regulations of where you can spray paint. So one of the things you need to have in an auto body shop is a paint booth. So how this one works is you can see there's filters here on the door, as well as in the back we have another set of filters. So what happens when you turn it on is the air is actually sucked through the door, it gets filtered, it gets blown over the cars, it gets filtered, and then it gets pushed out. There's a big stack on the roof. So it filters the air coming in, so you're getting clean air, which is really important. You don't want it to be sucking in, dirty filters, dusty air. That's going to get in your paint jobs. And then again, it filters the air before it gets pushed out, because you don't want to be venting just straight paint fumes into the environment, right?
So you mentioned a little bit about dust and particles. What would happen if, say, those items were able to get in here? Mm-hmm. What would that mean for your paint job?
Well, normally if you get a lot of dust and dirt in your clear coat, you just got to spend a few hours polishing it out. So you'd have to sand out those little dirt nibs and polish it. So it just means, more labor, more time wasted when you could be putting the car back together and delivering it to the customer. So just, masking paper, we have tape. What we do is we tape off anything that we don't want to get paint on, okay? So like the grill, the headlights, we cover all our glass, any trim moldings here. We don't want any overspray on it because it's really, really hard to get rid of. So you can see this BMW here, we've given it a coat complete of white primer, and we're going to paint the whole entire car white. Okay, so we've left the doors open. We're going to do a little bit inside of the door jambs as well, and then the whole vehicle will get a coat of white base and clear coat as well.
Is it really difficult to be able to, because it just seems like you have a lot of different areas to cover up. I mean, does it happen a lot where every part is almost impossible to cover?
No, I mean, it's a time-consuming process, but if you take your time and you do it right, you shouldn't get any overspray anywhere. Like that's
kind of one of those, like once you do it enough, you kind of get the hang of where you're supposed to put the tape.
Yeah,
and things like
yeah.
that.
If you do it a couple times, you'll kind of know, how to do it. But yeah, I mean, it's a time-consuming process. To do this car took probably about 3 hours to mask up for a complete paint. So, I mean, it's time consuming, but it's better than getting overspray and then spending the time to clean it off.
Right,
or
just
having to replace a part because you got overspray on it and it won't come off.
So if someone was to paint a car, what would you say, other than potentially schooling, like what type of experience do they have to have? I mean, do you just let anybody kind of run through the booth? I mean, industry-wide, what's usually, I guess, maybe the standard of, being able to paint a car?
So for something like this, normally you would start off by doing something easier, so spraying primer. So you start off spraying primer on smaller parts, eventually you start priming bigger parts, priming a whole car. Once you kind of get the feel for how to, use a gun down, then you can progress into doing things like paint. Obviously painting a complete car, it's going to be a little more challenging than if you're just painting a fender, but really like anything in this trade, it's all kind of hands-on and practicing. Here as well in Ontario, when you go through your apprenticeship for auto body, it also gives you a license to paint. So when you're in school, you're doing technical theory training on paint, and you're doing hands-on training on paint as well. So definitely helps.
For more information about the International Women's Automotive Society, please visit www.womenofautomotive.com.